Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. WeatherBrains episode 888. 888. And this is for the 23rd of January, 2023. Guess what? We're about a week away from our 17th anniversary. Who'd have thunk it? 17 years of weather, foolishness, fun, and other things on Monday nights. Wow. I'll have to go back and play a clip of the original here. I think I've got it loaded in here. Yeah, January 31st of 06. This was show one. I personally think we have way too many warnings. Severe thunderstorm warnings are a dime a dozen, and it's getting to be that way with tornado warning. Welcome to Weather. See, I'm griping about the same thing 17 years later that I was griping about in 06. That's funny to me. I mean, some things just never change. But David Black was the host, and David did a great job. He produced the show. It was tight. It was really professional, and it was right at 30 minutes. David was just really good. David worked with me for several years at the NBC channel here. And he's really good at, broadcasting and being professional and all that, where I'm really not. We're most weather people. We're just loose cannons. All right. So let's bring in everybody. We got all kind of people waiting to get on the show here. All right. Here they come. Here they come. We got James in Tulsa might be snowed in. He might be in a blizzard. We've got snow in Oklahoma and parts of Arkansas and Mizzou. James A., you snowed in out there?
Oh, we have declared the BMTP emergency, the bread, milk, and toilet paper emergency. I mean, we're going to be above freezing for most of it and back up close to 40 by Wednesday afternoon. So if people don't have 6 hours of toilet paper on hand, there's not much I can do about that.
Oh, yeah. All right. Awesome. All right. We got.
I'm about to send a sweet picture of the week, a new one, not a new one, but for internal dissemination only.
Yes, exactly.
Are you going to improve on my enhancement?
Oh, no, this is prepare to be amazed.
Oh, there we go.
Bill, how you got?
We got John and Jason on here. This is great. Two-man show.
Blue shirts.
Yeah, look official.
I didn't get the memo on the blue shirts.
Kevin somewhere. Where's he hiding out?
He is at the house. He's going to be dialing in from home.
Wow.
Dialing in literally?
Probably
using
not.
his Commodore 64 and his
Dialing
for dollars with a VIC-20. That's a great show title.
Pray at home.
Bill,
like
you
that.
have a lot of GRs going behind you.
Yeah,
well, because somebody gave me a bunch of great color tables, so I just couldn't get enough of them.
Just seeing nothing with them right now.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're all focused on Alma, Georgia from yesterday.
All right.
Nothing happened in Alma right now. Because James always makes fun of my railroad site because he thinks it's surveillance cameras.
Yeah, it looks like Bill's working the night shift as a security guard part-time with his security surveillance cameras back there.
Hey, Bill,
yeah.
Did you naturally know how to look at the surveillance videos of those freight yards, or did somebody train you on it?
Train. Oh,
sorry, I'll quit now.
How do you do that? It's just like your entire brain is programmed to search through every possible pun.
Misprogrammed.
He's got a million of them. He'll be here till midnight.
Yeah.
Right.
Tip the
Hey,
major
Amanda.
Hey.
How are you?
Amanda. Yes. Is Josh going to join us?
He should be. He just finished the 6 o'clock, so he should be joining as soon as possible.
What's the matter with this guy? I finished the 6 o'clock and I'm here. I mean, come on, what's he doing?
All I'm saying is I got to cut the day off today, which is very rare. I forget what it's like to have a Monday off. I haven't done weekends in so long. So having like a random work day off has been, I mean, so productive. I got so many things done. I felt like this is the most productive I've been in months.
Oh, we're about
And
to
now
ruin
you're
that
on
productivity.
WeatherBrains. Yeah,
I know,
we're
right?
going
Wrapping
to
up-
destroy the whole productivity thing right here.
Yep. I'm sure
No,
the
we're gonna finish
caterers were
strong.
late. Were the caterers late with Josh's dinner? Is that why he's running a few minutes late?
Yeah, his masseuse
Well,
is probably running a
he-
couple minutes late too.
He had an evening session with the masseuse, and it's running a little long here. So hopefully he'll
over
join
at the
us.
Renaissance. Yeah.
Well,
We're
no,
not
they
too
bring
far
him.
from it now. He's probably
Oh,
down
they
there.
bring him into
They
the
bring
TV
him
station.
into the
Yeah, that's
fancy
right.
new studios they have up down there. Yeah, Josh is
Yeah.
eating grapes and having the evening masseuse session right
If I
now.
know Josh, he's drinking a Diet Sunkiss or maybe a Gatorade, probably trying to scarf something down for his dinner break. It's very glamorous. Y'all know
He's
all
probably
too
drinking like a whole bottle of mayonnaise or something crazy, like y'all used to make them do, James.
This is what I had. That's John Oldshoe. This is what I had. I had a Rice Krispie treat for dinner. So
Oh,
That's a
hey,
big Rice Krispie
nutritious.
treat.
Can't beat that.
Here comes Dr. Laws here.
How big was that Rice Krispie treat? It's the size of that box?
No, if you dig in here, they're like kind of little.
Okay.
They're
Okay.
small.
Not for resale.
Yeah.
Oh, we get Dr. Jacobs tonight.
Yay.
Yes.
Very cool.
Now, did Neil get the COVID, the Rona, like everybody else? Or is Neil, are you
Man.
okay?
I've had it like 4 times already.
Golly. Woo. All right. So all we're missing is Josh, and we can get
Yeah, he
started.
said he would
here.
be right at 7.
What a slacker.
No, really. So we can't start at the top of the hour anyway. It's 59:09. So we got
You getting any of this winter stuff over there?
no.
Oh,
We're
good.
getting wind and rain.
Wind. Lots of wind.
And
I mean,
our friends in
This is probably
Mobile.
a 10-inch snow for us if the temp was below freezing. We're going to waste a lot of dendrites melting.
So who's been sharing the 18Z GFS? What boneheads have been doing that? Anybody here?
Buddy,
There
you
have
look at it?
been
Never.
there have been a slew of people sharing the 18Z NAM, which is so great for snow forecasting, isn't it? Or any other kind of forecasting.
Now you're going to hurt Dr. Jacobs' feelings here.
I know, but man,
I haven't looked at model output in probably 2 weeks.
good man.
It's good for your mental health. And welcome to our television viewers. It is the top of the hour. So we're going to get this thing going here on time. So let's get the recorders going. And here we go in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Join the American Meteorological Society by becoming a member of the band. The AMS Weather Band is a global community of weather enthusiasts dedicated to learning and sharing their love of science. Visit amsweatherband.org to learn more and join the band today.
WeatherBrains episode number 888 888. This is for the 23rd of January, 2012. And, we are about a week away from the 17th anniversary of this show, which is pretty crazy. The first show we launched was on the 31st of January, 2006. And we have made it for 17 years of Monday night madness here. Speaking of madness, James A., are you snowed in? Or do you have a blizzard in progress there?
Not quite. We've been watching soil temps in the 40s, air temp in the 40s today. The precip should start tomorrow, and it's going to be a mess of P-type with a very cold, dynamically cooling atmosphere over us. We're just hoping, well, some of us are hoping we stay above freezing through the duration of the event. It's going to be really close. I think we're going to waste a lot of a blockbuster snow melting it, but that's okay too.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see how these things pan out. These really dynamic systems like this and heavy snow rates can bring surprises. There's always a surprise with these things somewhere. So it'll be interesting to watch you and Oak City and Fort Smith and Harrison, Arkansas, and I've got radio stations in Cape Girardeau, Missouri, and Mount Vernon, Illinois, and they're just like right on the stinking line where they could just have an all-night soaker, or they could have 6 inches of snow here. So it makes for interesting moments in the weather office. I'll say that. Let's see. I'm trying to see. Is here comes Troy. I don't think Jen is on here. Jen, are you here?
I am here. Hi.
Okay, everybody's been slipping in here. So
probably have too many windows, too many people in here tonight.
Yeah. So Jen, you do this radio thing. You're dealing with the same thing we are with the snow and rain line, and it's complicated.
It's very complicated. Kansas City is always a pain for me. I have
show title. That's our first show title candidate.
Brian Busby would like
go
a
ahead and
word
lock
with you.
that one in. That one's worth it right there.
Texas stuff. I've got Texas Panhandle stuff. I've got stuff in Oklahoma, all the way up here. We had 4 inches yesterday in my neck of the woods, and we could get 4 to 6 with this before we switched to rain. So this is going to be quite the doozy for us too. And then it's the wind. I was doing some forecasts, looking at some of the winds for like the Tennessee Valley, and like you're talking, James, gust 50, 55 in Nashville. So this is quite the storm coming in.
Yeah, that's another good show title. So we got Dr. Neil Jacobs back. Neil, you did a great job of anchoring the coverage at AMS. How was your experience in Denver for the duration?
It was good. It was fun. I had one crazy day where I had like 8 talks on a Tuesday, and then the rest of the week was pretty low key. But I left North Carolina before I fixed my HVAC unit, so I've actually been spending this week juggling Pinewood Derby and HVAC repair. Haven't looked at a model forecast since AMS, actually.
Probably good for your mental health. Now, wait, let's review this. You did 8 talks in one day. How do you do that?
Well, it was like 8 speaking engagements. So I think I had 5 talks, 2 town halls, and then some kind of panel discussion or something.
Goodness.
You just go to one after the other and just make sure all your talks are uploaded ahead of time so the session chairs don't go crazy. In fact, I was session chair of a session I was speaking in too, so it was kind of weird. But wow. Yeah, and then the rest of the week I was home free.
Yeah, well, no, goodness gracious, that's like being a pinball in a pinball machine. Wow. Troy Kimmel, what's going on down in Austin? What's your world like?
Beautiful day here today. We had plenty of sun till about mid-afternoon, and the mid-level clouds moved in, and we've got this upper level low and surface low really kind of shooting eastward through South Texas more than anything else over the coming days. So we'll be in for the rain while the folks to the north, i.e. Rick and other folks, will be dealing with other things. But about an inch of rain here would be very welcome in Austin, Texas. This has been a very dry month, and we're still actually running, as of this point, I think I saw a couple of minutes ago that our temperatures are still about 7 or 8 degrees above average for the month. I think that'll come down a little bit as we finish up the month, but still going to be well above average and drier than average.
So let's go up Interstate 35. Rick Smith, are you snowed in yet?
No, but we are preparing to possibly maybe be partially snowed in or rained in, or no. Yeah, like James said, if we were a couple of degrees cooler at the surface, this would be a pretty big deal as far as snow. I mean, we've been advertising as this big pretty snow. It's the best kind of snow. It's going to look like a lot, and you can hear the flakes hitting the ground. They're so big and wet, and then hopefully it's gone pretty quick. I mean, Neil, we were in, and Troy and Kim's not on here, but in Denver, it had snowed like, I don't know, a week or two before, and there's still these mountains of ugly brownish, grayish, black snow in the streets. I like it when it snows, you look at it, and then it's gone. So maybe this is what we'll get this time.
When does it start, Rick? There. Hey, Rick, when does it start?
Starts moving into Southwest Oklahoma tomorrow morning, probably to I-35 in the metro area around 11 to noon, somewhere in there, and probably snowing off and on for a good part of the afternoon into the evening. It is going to be close. I mean, we're right on the line with temperatures, and some of the models have been kind of struggling with what to do with those surface temperatures and precipitation type and things like that. But it really looks like, starting out as rain. And with these heavier rates, if we can get the temperature to cool just a couple of degrees, we'll be in business there for a while.
Well, to both you and James A., good luck with the social media haters tomorrow. It doesn't matter if you're right or wrong or whatever. They're coming. I mean,
We're
they're
already
coming
wrong
after
and
you.
it hadn't even started yet.
Oh man, it's something about snow. It brings out the most vile haters, and anyway. But that's a talk for another day. Bill Murray,
I will take a thunderstorm. Which, by the way, we have not had any thunderstorms so far this month. Expecting our first tomorrow. I will take that, James and Rick, any day of the week rather than what you're going to get. I'll take the thunderstorms.
I'm with you.
Yeah, exactly. All right, Bill Murray, let's get this show started. I'm very curious to get this one going. Interesting discussion tonight.
Yeah, James. When we get together with big groups like this, usually it's not because of something good happening. So we'll go ahead and get that out of the way early here. But we got a great crew tonight to talk about the January 12th tornado outbreak in Alabama. I'll start with Josh Johnson, the Chief Meteorologist, WSFA in Montgomery. Josh, good to have you here. I'm glad we were able to appeal to the Supreme Court and get you on the show tonight. So thank you for making that happen.
Thankful to be here, Bill. Always good to visit with you.
It's always good to see you too. Thank you. And Amanda Curran, meteorologist at WSFA in Montgomery with Josh. I watched you and Josh extensively because we were concerned about Selma, and I turned you on about 30 or 40 minutes before the tornado went into Selma. I was absolutely amazed by your performance, both of you. We knew Josh was good, Amanda. Didn't know much about you, learned a lot about you that day. One of our listeners wrote in and said, you got to get these two on the show. And we agreed totally. Amanda, welcome to WeatherBrains.
Hey, appreciate it so much. I am a longtime listener, first time caller. So appreciate just even getting the extension for the invite. And I cannot pray. I know Josh hates it so much. I cannot praise Josh enough. In the almost 9 years I've been at WSFA, he has literally taught me so much about not just being a good meteorologist, but being a compassionate person. So being on a team with Josh and having a great leader like Josh, I know he's probably rolling his eyes so hard right now. Josh, mwah, love you. Best boss ever.
It's more of a cringe than an eye roll, but I appreciate it.
But it's the truth.
I'm trying to figure out, does she want a day off? What are we angling for?
No, I'm on my day off right now.
Well, I think
Josh.
she got
okay.
her one day of the year day off today, Josh. So that may have been it right there. It's 364 more days for you, Amanda. But you guys were doing a spectacular job that day.
Thank
and
you so much.
I was mesmerized by your performance. We're joined by a large part of the crew from the National Weather Service in Birmingham tonight, starting with Kevin Laws, the Science and Operations Officer. Kevin's been a friend of the show on many times. Kevin, don't know what to say. We'll get into it here in a minute, but it's nice to speak with you again. Let's do this sometime when we don't have a bad event to talk about.
Yeah, tell me about it. Good to be back with you, Billy. It's been a long time, but I hate to say it, but once a year, it seems like we're on here talking about yet again another tragedy across the state. It's hard to believe, isn't it?
It really is. Warnings Coordination Meteorologist John DeBlock, another hero in Alabama. John, good to have you here tonight.
Great to be with you, Bill. We got the Blues Brothers going on here.
You do, the Blues Brothers. That's an appropriate an appropriate notation there. And you've got Jason Davis with you, forecaster for the Weather Service in Birmingham also. And Jason, you were working that day, weren't you? I guess you all were, but you were working, actually producing mornings that day.
Yeah, Kevin, Matt, and I were all doing mornings that day.
Well, fantastic. Well, WeatherBrains crew, now we've got Dr. Kim Cloko McLean with us, so we have an even dozen here on the show tonight. I guess a baker's dozen, if you count the two sitting down in Calera. So, Kim, it's nice to have you here. We've already compared all the forecast snow totals, rain totals, everything coming for Oklahoma tomorrow. Tell us what you think about what's going to happen.
Actually, I think, and I apologize, I couldn't find my mic coming back from AMS, so I hope that my sound is okay. Just on the laptop. But what's wonderful is my husband and I were just comparing notes. There are no two school systems that have made the same decision in the local area. So the University of Oklahoma Norman campus is closing right now. The schools are staying open, which that never happens. They usually are lockstep. But the campus of the university that's in Oklahoma City is still open. And in Tulsa, it's still open, but the Oklahoma City schools, I think, have closed, and it's like everything is opposite. So we're just all rolling the dice out here. And we had a very extended conversation about what is the material difference between a winter storm watch and a winter storm warning, because that's the difference. In Cleveland County here, we have the warning, and just one county north is the watch, or sorry, is the advisory. And everyone is just a flurry of decisions are being made. It's a great time.
Well, the kids can all sleep in the schools tomorrow night. They can make it for one night. I think they keep enough toothpaste for just one night, just for an event like this. Well, good. Well, let's go back and talk about that day. I want to go back if we have time, because I know Josh and Amanda and everybody, committed to give us a bunch of time tonight. I want to learn. Josh, I don't think we've ever had you on the show unless it was very early. Did we ever have you on here?
I think this is my first time. I've watched a lot. We tried to do it after the Beauregard disaster back on March 3rd, 19, but it didn't work out. So I'm happy to be here tonight. I think it's my first. I have been, when the show first started, I think I was like a WeatherBrains groupie for a while. I was the gopher. I would go get drinks, or anybody needed any dry cleaning picked up or anything. I was your guy. But
yeah, I think you were in the credits as the key grip. I've never understood what that meant at the end of the movie. Josh, what is a key grip? I'm not.
If you have to ask, then you'll never understand.
Yeah, it's kind of like the best boy.
Well, we all, of course, know Josh really, really well. So I'm taking for granted that, we need to spend a little time tonight and delve into your background too, Josh. Same with Amanda, because I'm very fascinated. Amanda, you went to Millersville, is that right?
Linden State.
Linden State. Okay.
Yes.
Good. I remember seeing it, but I couldn't. I should have gotten that right, but I didn't look it back up. But we want to hear about your background too, because I'm sure that was an amazing adaptation to Alabama, if I can make up a word.
100%. And I think it's an ongoing process. I mean, it's been almost a decade. And I mean, being born and raised in Southern New Hampshire, then going to an even smaller town in the Northeast Kingdom of Vermont and getting my college education in such like a small knit community. And then I come to Montgomery, Alabama, and everybody's like, why would you want to go to Alabama? And I go, oh, I hear the beaches are great. And I can't tell you how many people up north are like, Alabama's got beaches. I'm like, oh my God, did y'all not take a geography class?
Tell them it's a lie.
Yes, but like Montgomery is a booming metropolis compared to where I went to college and where I grew up in Southern New Hampshire, where there's more cows than people. So I really love Montgomery and just Alabama in general. Like if you ask any college student who's studying meteorology, like if you had to pick a place to go, I mean, Oklahoma would be up there, Alabama, just the deep South in general. And I mean, going through college when everything happened in Tuscaloosa back in 2011 and watching some of the stuff and then actually translating that to research and education, that was really a big driver too when I got an offer down in Montgomery. And it's crazy that this is still my first job straight out of college. I don't know a lot of people who in TV stay in their first job this long. So it's definitely a special and unique experience.
Well, we're sure glad you did and glad to have you here. I look on Twitter one day this weekend, I see, which state would you absolutely not live in? And I'm like, don't go there, delete. And I don't want to know what it says, because, I'm just going to get really, really mad and really, really, really angry. Josh, you're right. We don't want everybody to know about these great beaches we have in Alabama.
Yeah, let's keep that a closely guarded secret.
They're absolutely horrible. Don't go. There's no
terrible.
Good food. I mean, who wants to step in like literal white sand beaches? It's the worst. I don't recommend coming down here at all.
Exactly. Well, that's our state pitch for tourism.
Panama City's ready when you are. Come on down.
Well, we'll try to circle back around and get into a little bit more of that. But let's go back to the setup for the 12th for a second, and thoughts ahead of the event. Who wants to start? John DeBlock, you want to kick us off? Talk about you and Jason, maybe talk about.
I'll defer to Jason, being the forecaster who kind of worked up leading into the event. He's probably got the most relevant information there.
Yeah, I wasn't directly forecasting, but I was still on shift, of course, looking at everything. Leading up to it, I guess the main expectation was for more of a line of storms or QLCS. It's tricky because some of you had the instability was definitely there. The forcing, we noted there's get some cold temperatures aloft. So we're going to get some pretty good storms that day, but just was going to come down to some of the details of the low level shear and some wind directions as far as what happened. And initially thought, maybe a couple of tornadoes. Wasn't really until I think that night before where things started changing.
A lot of the shear early on in the models was unidirectional. So that was leading to storm mode, being a linear system. Really did not set itself up until about 24 hours beforehand. The models started doing a little bit of a turn there. And as it turns out, we saw directional shear as well as the speed shear. So the photographs were just entirely different from what they had been predicted to be. We were able to do some balloon launches here that showed the winds had backed significantly deviant from what the models had been saying. And that, just looking at things early on, that's one of the big factors that played into the way things turned out.
So, John, when were some of those special releases that y'all did around the event?
We did one I believe at 15Z and 17Z, so 9 a.m. and 11 a.m. And then the storm started hitting central Alabama right around noon.
Yeah, and the morning storms were a bit of a surprise in terms of, I guess, not by the time you got up and going, but 4 days out, I wouldn't have thought we would have dealt with severe weather early in the morning, and we had a couple of EF2 tornadoes in the northern part of central Alabama CWA and also in North Alabama. How surprising was that to you, Kevin Laws?
Well, I think it was Jason and I the day before. We were talking about, don't be surprised to see something north of here. We were talking about as far north as Paducah, even as seeing possibly some action too. The way things started changing, we were talking about as early as Monday, and I had three things. Number one, you can get tornadoes in Alabama with southwest surface winds. Two, you can get tornadoes in Alabama with unidirectional shear. But three, I think the bigger thing that I was noticing early on is that a lot of the CAM models were overmixing the atmosphere, and that tends to happen. We don't have afternoon, midday tornadoes in Alabama very often. Most of the time, they come around 6 p.m. on. Overnight, we're probably the nocturnal tornado capital of the world in the deep south. And so when you have these afternoon type storms like this, you got to be really careful, because the mixing that occurs when you have an elevated mix layer like we did in this event, which means we have a lot of dry air aloft and get mixed down to the surface. And I think and I'm trying to articulate, and we were talking about the last week a little bit, and I'm trying to articulate what I was trying to say. It's not that the models were wrong. The models were doing what they're supposed to do, but they just didn't model the atmosphere correctly, if that makes sense. So the models were behaving like they're supposed to behave based on their equations. Neil probably could tell you more than I can about the equational part of it, but it just wasn't modeling what was going to happen correctly, because the dry air, if it wasn't going to get mixed down to the surface, the HRR, for example, had the dew points in Montgomery at 56 and ended up being about 62. That's a huge difference. And so when that was happening, it was also veering the winds around southwest. So if you don't mix like that, the winds are also not going to veer around southwest. They're going to be more south, maybe even a little bit east of south. And I think right along that boundary, that was what was occurring there. And it's hard to pick up on that, especially 2 or 3 days in advance. Sometimes the mesoscale models, the CAM models, can do a little better job in real time with it, but it's almost at that point you have to sort of shift your focus from what you thought was going to happen into what is actually happening out there, and can you adjust fast enough to make life-saving decisions.
Before you go, James, Kim Poco-McLean, talk about that anchoring bias and how that can become a big problem if you don't get away from that.
It is so interesting. It's like somebody in our field took a cognitive psychology class and they have anchored to anchoring and adjustment. I'm not sure why. I don't know why this has become all of the hotness, but it is all the hotness right now. So I will say that we tend to take in the first piece of information that we receive about something and formulate an early judgment on it. And then later, subsequent pieces of information that come in, we adjust to that reference point. It's a very common way that judgment and decision-making in most domains works. So there is a concern in our field that what you what you're exposed to early on when the forecast first mentions a potential event, you might anchor your expectation to whatever contours are given to it. So however it's qualitatively described early on, you might carry that expectation in subsequent time steps. And I'll be very honest, in the social sciences aspect of meteorology, we're really trying to look into this problem in relevant ways and see, how much do people anchor to early forecasts? And, or in our context, it could be the case that they understand that there's variability and change. And some of the work that's been done, you could sort of imagine this as a trade-off between two poles. Either you could have a forecast that is very variable and changes a whole lot, updates a lot. Or you could maybe think about having a forecast that's a little more bland and maybe not as precise, but just very steady, like you sort of smooth out all of that detail. And the early research is sort of starting to show that people prefer to have that information that is the best you have at the moment, and they trust it more, and they can live with variability. So I appreciate that there is a concern about anchoring and adjustment. It is, like I said, all the hotness. Stay tuned. There will be more, but don't throw out your best sense of what the forecast is today and all the detail that you might be able to give for fear of change. So I'll pass it back to you, Bill. I hope that
Dr. Jacobs, you were mentioning the thought about anchoring bias and data assimilation. So
yeah,
talk about that just for a second before Jason.
I totally thought you were talking about something else because I'm not a social scientist, but Kevin's exactly right. The models were doing what the code was written to do, but the problem is the code is written to do some stuff that is suboptimal sometimes. And basically, when you run into a situation like this in the data assimilation system, if you launch radiosondes or take in additional observations, and those observations might be perfectly representative of the atmosphere, if they disagree by a certain number more than what the model thinks they should say based on the first guess, which is the previous forecast, the quality control system throws out the observation. And so it's really hard for a model to correct itself. And we would see this a lot early on with the Ruck model when planes would fly around storms and they would sample the dry air on the perimeter of the storm. And then the model would just overwrite the storm with dry air because it thought the whole area was dry. And it was the plane just weaving in and out of thunderstorms. And so it was doing exactly what the code was written to do. But we do use those conventional observations for satellite data assimilation, and we call them anchor observations. And that's why I was totally confused with what Kim was talking about.
Excellent point. James A., you were going to jump back onto the forecasting side.
Yeah, we've got a lot of J names on the show tonight, so I'll sit back and make sure. What Kim was talking about too, I always tell my guys, and not just guys, my team, that old expression, who are you going to believe, the model or your lying eyes? And it's just hard to shake loose sometimes with why is this happening instead of just dealing with it happening and going with it. But my question was on your special soundings, at what point, or did they ever, some of the model proximity soundings agree or be really similar to the actual environmental soundings that you guys took?
Overall, of course, once we're launching our own soundings, we're not looking at the model soundings at that point. We have to look at the real data, and by that time, also we're seeing what the storm is doing. So,
gotcha.
Okay, so we rolling up into the day here. Talk about any other forecast challenges, Kevin.
Well,
John,
let me go back.
Jason.
Let me go back to that point because it's critically important in our business to not get anchored. If there's a way to not do that, because how many times have we talked about on this show and just in general, the warning process doesn't start in that last 15 minutes. It starts in the days leading up to the event. And if we can't get it quite right, and we've lost some confidence in what we're doing here, maybe, or we're not quite seeing things correctly, that will translate into the day of. And I've seen it many times. I think it's getting rare, rarer, if that's the right word. But if you're anchored to a certain extent to what you think is going to happen, how does that affect your morning performance? I'd love to hear Kim's thought on that, because I've seen it before many times. It's almost like your ideas are not matching what you thought was going to happen, so I can't adjust fast enough, and that's a very serious problem in our business, I think.
You know, it is really interesting thinking of this from the forecaster perspective. We are also humans, so the anchoring and adjustment thing, you're right, it can absolutely be part of the forecaster process. I think one of the pieces of literature I've seen out of forecast verification stuff that relates, forecasters tend to do better, so they have better discriminability of severe weather outcomes when you have a watch that precedes the warnings. So like there is this suggestion that in our system we bake in different kinds of cues you could think of as anchors. And so yeah, if you are anchored to a forecast scenario where you don't think something's going to happen, that probably does give you some inertia to overcome if you are in the hot seat and thinking about a warning situation. That's a really interesting point, Kevin.
So John DeBlock, talk about the risks communicated by SPC, Weather Service Birmingham, Huntsville, all the offices in advance of it, and how that messaging may do us a disservice from time to time. It seemed like the SPC that morning caught up really quickly, or at least it helped me catch up really quickly with those early storms, with the risks and the mesoscales and, what you guys were talking about. I caught back up really quickly from thinking this wasn't a big event to suddenly it was. And I kind of came into it cold that morning because I hadn't paid a lot of attention in the time leading up to it. I hadn't forecast since Sunday, but I had to change my perspective really quickly. Talk about that messaging issue, John DeBlock, and if there's anything we should be doing differently.
I think we were early on in all of us in the community here. We were looking at a slight risk, and none of us were really expecting the day that we had. I think that's across the board. Now, one exception, I want to tip my hat to Kevin, who the day before was cornering me in my office saying, we need to not give up on this. We need to watch this carefully. And he swished my eyes onto a few things, and I started digging into it and seeing the potential for it to go a lot worse than it had been thought. But that said, here we are, we're bickering between marginal and slight and enhanced. And I'm wondering, are we muddying the waters with the public response by dickering over these levels of threat? Do we want people to prepare differently for a tornado event because it's a 1 out of 5 or a 2 out of 5 or a 3 out of 5? No, everybody needs to be prepared just the same. It's hard to tell people you've got to be concerned about a level 1 threat equally to a level 3 threat. We get 14, on the average, 14 tornado days a year in Alabama. It's a fact of life in Alabama. You're going to get 11, 12, 13, 14 tornado days a year. And those are the days you need to be on your A game. You can't come with your B game just because it's a 1 threat. If that 1 tornado comes through your town, your school, your house, it's just as impactful as that 3 or 4 or 5 threat day when other people are getting affected as well. So I think we may be not relaying the level of concern that needs to be observed by the public, even with just a 1 out of 5 or a 2 out of 5 threat.
And so John, I think that's an interesting point. I'm glad you said that. I saw the slide. We obviously had a record number of tornadoes in January already. We may add to that tomorrow. We can talk about that a little bit later. But in looking at the tornado statistics for Alabama for 2022, you're right, 14 days. How many days do you think we had a threat of tornadoes that didn't materialize? Would that add another 50%, another 100% to that total? How do we address that?
I would say maybe 30%. above that. I think it's very rare when we forecast a tornado day and don't get something happen. Fortunately, I guess that's a good aspect for us, that we don't, falsely alert people. So yeah, I think that's a good number, that 14, and if it's an extra 3 that we're telling people to be on guard, that's the price of living in Alabama. We talked about the great things in Alabama. That's where we pay for those beaches and all the great weather at other times of the year.
And John, let me say this too. John makes a good point about the totality of what we deal with. It's one thing to have the national coverage in Selma and Autauga County and places like this, but we get the benefit, I think, of going out to every single tornado track and meeting with every single person who's impacted. And I can promise you that a lot of EF1s, low end 2s get underreported, let's say nationally, but have really impacted a lot of lives. And I think that's something that we see from our perspective that doesn't get reported a lot.
It's that aspect that I'm really interested in hearing your thoughts about. John, you raised the issue of Storm Prediction Center categories and the proliferation of them, and does this really add value? I mean, one of the reasons they did that was because they were trying to put into the system some way to say, we might not have a lot of tornadoes, but if we do, they could be bad. And that, I think, really suits what happens to you guys all the time. And I look at, Josh, Kevin, John, just everyone assembled here, and Amanda, you guys live in this environment and you deal with this and messaging it all the time. So if not through just making some linear category system where we try to shove everything into one sort of 1 through 5 categories, is there some better way to try to reach your populations? Because I think the significant tornado difference might be important for your population, so many of whom live in mobile homes. And it might be the critical difference between, saying, there might be tornadoes, but they might not be too severe. I might ride this out, versus it takes hours out of your day to think about leaving and getting somewhere else. And I just love any thoughts that you guys have about that.
Well, Kim, in the last 5 years, we've had 15 tornado fatalities now, plus these 8. We've had 23 tornado fatalities with EF2 and EF3 tornadoes. And the last event we had, every one of the fatalities in Alabama was a manufactured home. 135 miles an hour. They are built better than ever. It's a great affordable option for housing, but we need affordable ways to shelter people as well with those affordable homes. They're built well, they don't fly well, and they certainly don't land well.
And I think you're onto something there too, because there would be nobody would argue with you if you said you don't stay in your home if it's on fire. Yet we have people that are happy to stay in their home facing this nearly the same level of destruction.
On this,
instantaneously.
Josh, I'd love to hear your thoughts on this, because this was something you were so intentional about with the Lee County Day, and you were thinking of these people and you were thinking of their different problem. And, you can think of it from the warning perspective. You were thinking of that day as you made your live coverage decisions, but also in the days leading up. What do you think?
I think it's such a tricky issue, because I watch a lot of severe weather coverage from across the country, and I hear a lot of, I think it's probably unintentional, but unintentional condescension towards people who live in mobile and manufactured housing. And when people feel attacked, and when people feel like you don't empathize with them, I think you lose the ability to message to them to some degree. They become defensive. So the messaging we sort of latch onto is a very human sort of messaging. It's hard. Like, we talk about 14 to 20 tornado days or possible tornado days a year. does someone, if you're a single mother and you have 3 children and one of them's sick and you've got to be at work at 8 a.m. and we're telling you to leave your mobile home at 3 a.m. and nothing happens 10 straight times, are you going to keep doing it? Can we blame them if they stop? So John and I have talked about this a lot. Kevin and I have talked about this a lot, that's the challenge in Alabama is the mobile and manufactured housing and a way to connect with people. One thing we've started after the Beauregard disaster was we call it the 5-minute rule. If it takes you more than 5 minutes to leave a mobile or manufactured home and reach a sturdy site-built structure, then you should consider leaving that mobile or manufactured home when a tornado watch is issued. And I don't think that's the magic bullet either. I don't think that's the perfect solution because you're still trying to convince them to leave over and over and over. So I think it's very difficult. I think the magic bullet on some of this may be an engineering solution. Someone needs to invent some way to anchor these things to the ground better than we have so far, or some sort of storm shelter that is exceptionally affordable, portable, and can be a part of the installation process. But that's our kind of challenge in Alabama is that because I think Kevin and John can speak a lot more about this because they go do the surveys, but most of the time, these mobile and manufactured homes are not getting obliterated by the wind of the tornado. They're getting lofted into the air. And if you took a site-built brick structure and picked it up and threw it sideways into the ground, the result would be exactly the same. It would. So that's the challenge. And I don't think we as communicators can solve it alone. I don't think engineers can solve it alone. I don't think the government can solve it alone, but I do think there's some path here between better messaging, better sheltering options, and a more human connection and genuine empathy with people who live in mobile homes. I think there's a path, but it's going to take it's an orchestra. This is not going to be a solo act. This is going to be an orchestra of effort to help these people.
And so, who's going? Who wanted to talk?
Sorry, could I follow up on that really quickly, Bill? Is that all right?
Yes, absolutely.
Sorry, I should have put in chat, but I'm curious to know how many of you have worked with the folks putting together and executing Alabama's Safer Spaces law, because as I understand it, that was designed to give different kinds of facilities cover, like sort of legal liability cover, if they serve as a shelter when tornadoes are possible. But, it might not be like a FEMA rated shelter, but a better option than being in something like a mobile manufactured house. And so it was designed to help neighbors to help neighbors. And, when you're talking about that 5-minute rule, Josh, it really strikes me that you'll need a lot of people who are willing to say, I might not have a perfect thing, but I have a better thing, and helping each other. Have you guys, I see a lot of nods. Are you familiar with this? And what do you think about how it's been designed and executed?
Yeah, I was familiar with the discussions through, talking with the emergency managers with the state EMA as that policy was developed, as the legislation was put forward. It's basically a good Samaritan law for your structure, for you and your liability, so that someone can come to a safer place. Don't get me wrong, there's lots of success stories where people are doing that. Neighbors are inviting neighbors in. Even in Autauga County, in Old Kingston, one of the families evacuated, go to a large retail outlet, and they spent the day there. And their home, their manufactured home, was completely obliterated with kids' toys all scattered about in the debris and such. There is some hesitancy for larger organizations to welcome people into their facilities for fear of damage to the facility. And how do you manage 30 or 40 people coming to your whatever it is and keep it clean? Do you let them bring their pets in? So there's a lot of intricacies that are involved with that decision on a corporate standpoint. Now, neighbor helping neighbor is a wonderful option. How many times do we see a fixed site-built home next to a manufactured home that's been destroyed and that fixed home is, barely damaged at all. So it is going to take a society and the entire, every aspect of us. From Autauga County is a fairly affluent county. There's a good bunch of working people there. Why some of these communities that have the more affordable housing can't have a shelter, a community shelter there, or for every 6 manufactured homes, you've got to install something. I know people don't like the government to come down and dictate what to do, but there is a better sense out there that we should be following.
Dr. Jacobs, your thought?
Let me jump in here, Bill, real quick. Yeah, this is the first. I've always speculated about this, but this was the first time on a survey that I actually talked to one of the victims in Autauga County. I talked to her stepson, I believe it was, and he called his stepmom before it got there with plenty of lead time and said, "You need to leave now," because he recognized it was headed for her, and she decided to stay because she said, "If it's my time, it's my time." So I've always speculated there's a certain segment of people who say that. Whether they would go to a shelter that's on their property or right down the road, it's hard to say. But he confirmed with me that he called her and told her, and that was her exact phrase. So, I mean,
you haven't heard that before, have you, Kim Clucker McLean?
I was putting this in chat. It's actually something that's predicted in our behavioral models. When someone doesn't either know the things that they could do to protect themselves, or they don't have access to the things that are needed to protect themselves. And it's been measured in Vortex Southeast, now Vortex USA research, where they look at people who are in site-built homes versus mobile manufactured housing in Alabama, for example. What do you do when a tornado warning is issued? And the propensity to sort of do this prayerful reflection, it's twice as high as for people who are in permanent homes. And my interpretation of it is what you'd see if you look at something we call the extended parallel process model, where you look at, what switch is flipped? Do people know what to do? Can they do it? Yes or no? And if the answer is no, they go into emotion-focused coping rather than problem-focused coping. Instead of trying to deal with the issue, they try to deal with their feelings. And when you hear that from people, that they're saying, if it's my time, it's my time, that is, to me, an indication of a failure. An indication of a failure in our ability to either help that person understand what they could do, or give them the resources they need to do something else. And this is one of the reasons why I was so glad to bring up with you all the conversation about the Safer Spaces law, and recognize that it's not a perfect thing. But at this point, I mean, with the problem you guys face, I think don't let the perfect be the enemy of the good, and try to help empower people so that that is a little bit less prevalent.
Yeah, and I was going to mention that resignation thing happens in aviation too. In investigated aircraft crashes, a lot of people give up. And I guess the key to me is moving forward with this process in messaging on days like this, which I thought Josh did really great, is empowering people that don't think they're empowered. And Josh was really good about that, watching his coverage several times, that, okay, now is the time you can leave. You can make this decision. And I think that's top notch.
Well, and I decided I hated it for the stepson. And so I didn't want to, it was obviously very raw the day after. And I didn't really want to get into the conversation, but I should at some point try to find him and get more into the conversation and what that was like. Did he offer her any suggestions? Hey, get in the car and drive to Prattville. Hey, this is something really easy you can do. Or was it just a quick, not going to go anywhere, I'm going to stay right here? And I think there's also an element too that we've talked about it before, is there's people find comfort with, when they're afraid or when the situation is dangerous, they find comfort in being surrounded by what they're familiar with and not trying to risk going into something that's unfamiliar to them. And we've talked about what to do in case you're in a mobile home, go outside and lay in a ditch. I mean, you got to be kidding me. If we really think somebody's going to do that,
even though that's a better option. In my opinion, that lady could have laid in the ditch and probably have survived very easily versus been in that home. So, but expecting someone to be able to physically get up, go outside, especially if it's in the middle of the night, and do that, it's just, I think that's just unrealistic.
And that's what I think was so shocking to me, because I think of Watauga County as a storm savvy location. I know those people have been through numerous tornadoes previously, and I just was heartbroken to see the death toll. I know sometimes you just have to take somebody and shake them. And we can only do so much on the air. You know, personally, sometimes, you know, my favorite line of all time was, "Hey, honey, you know, you need to get up. We're about to have a tornado." And the response was, "What should I wear?" And my response was, "Whatever you'd like to wear to the hospital, because that's where we're going to be going if this thing keeps coming for us." And boy, I got some response out of that night. You know, James A. talked about resignation, Amanda. Some meteorologists could fold in that situation and stop being able to communicate. You and Josh were so perfect playing off each other. And I was amazed by your coolness under fire that day. Talk about how you stayed cool and kept communicating when it was obvious that lives were on the line.
I think what we do is really important on a sunny day or a stormy day, but I think what we do during severe weather coverage in the moment, Josh, I think recently has kind of added this into his vocabulary, that you have the chance right now to make a life-saving decision for yourself. Giving that call to action is so very important. And I think with repetition of us obviously being in Alabama and having so many situations like this, I will say that I did 5 years of severe weather coverage in Alabama before there was anybody who perished. And that was the March 3rd Beauregard situation. So that really one rocks you when you see something that you know that there's absolutely no chance that we can stop this. This is an active situation. Now is not the time to think, oh, what should I have done? Now is the time to be reactive. And I think that's something in our messaging that's maybe changed over the past couple of years, or just with the last couple of events, is empowering people to know that you have the power to take back control. You definitely don't want to see a tornado barreling towards your house. And with this event in particular, this was an event where the cell was out ahead of the main line itself. So it wasn't rain wrapped, and it was actually very visible. We got a lot of video, a lot of picture, a lot of confirmation of it visually. But you look at this big, powerful tornado and you go, oh, I stand no chance of that. When Josh says something, you have the ability to make a life decision right now that will save your life if you just get up and get moving now while you have the time. I think empowering people to know that they have the control, even when Mother Nature seems like she's the ultimate controller, I think that's super important. But when it comes to communicating, I think that's when it's the most important for us to stay cool. And I just think when you think in the back of your mind, I mean, if it was my grandmother, if it was my mother, if it was my sibling, if it was somebody, a family friend, because me and Josh both live in Watauga County, not the part in particular that was impacted. It went north of the city of Prattville, where I think a lot of our viewership is. But I mean, I've gone out to those schools. Josh has gone out to those schools. You see those kids, and we try to implement that in their mind to bring that home. And those are the people we think about. I mean, I can't say for Josh or for Stan or for anybody on TV or for anybody who does this communicated, like trying to communicate information, whether it's to block the National Weather Service. But I think we take it personally. And I think we find a way to push through it, because I know that if it was my grandmother who lived in Boston, and I would want her to have the same information that I would try to provide. So when you think of your viewership kind of like your family and as a close personal friend, is just you don't have an option. The blinders go on. You go, this is the end. We have to portray this information because it can be the difference between someone living or someone not living. And it's more important than ever in that moment.
Yeah, that's a great point, Amanda. And I just had a question. The discussion about empowerment and telling people what they can do to be safe in a tornado versus what you can't do or what they're not going to be able to do is I mean, Kim and I have talked about this a lot here. And here in our area in central Oklahoma, there's a history of some TV meteorologists talking about, you cannot survive this tornado if you're not below ground. If you do not go below ground, you're going to die in this tornado. And it really does, according to what Kim and other researchers have found, it really does put people in a bad situation. It's like, well, I don't have anywhere to go underground. I guess I'm just going to sit here on the couch. You're defeated. You have no hope. So I've never heard of that type of messaging being used in Alabama. And Amanda and Josh and maybe even James Spann, would there ever be a circumstance where you would say something like that? I know what the point is. The point is to convey the seriousness and how you really need to take shelter. But I think it's having the opposite effect in some cases, a very negative impact. So Amanda, Josh, anybody else, have you ever heard that language being used, or how would you go about conveying that information, the urgency of that information, without going that far?
Well, I never have, Rick. I've never heard someone say that directly. The phrasing that I used in this last one was, the decisions that some of you make in the next 5 minutes are going to be the difference between life and death for you and your family. And again, I think that's more empowering language than it is threatening language. Obviously, I mean, it's pretty threatening, but given what the radar was showing, it was pretty, I think the message matched the moment in that instance. I would never say anything like that. Just, it's not my style. It's not how I view it. It's not how I want to connect with people. I want to always give them a path. And I would rather, I'd rather them look to me for inspiration than sit there and do nothing in desperation.
Yeah, let me just say this. I'm like Josh. I mean, I would never, ever say that. And I'm not faulting anybody in Oklahoma for saying that, because, and I've said this a million times, you have to understand the culture, the people, and the geography and the microclimate of the market that you serve. What might work in Oklahoma might not work in Alabama, and vice versa. But if I were to get on television and say, if you're not underground, you will not survive, that immediately instills hopelessness in people. I'm not going to do anything. I'm just going to die. It's it. I'm done. And they're not going to do anything. You have to understand the people that you're talking to. And the bottom line, Rick, I'm not going that way either. Never.
I mean, I think the message.
And I want to be clear. I'm not being overly critical of the TV meteorologists that say that and have said that. They said it for what I believe are good reasons at the time, trying to get people motivated to take action and in very, very serious life-threatening situations. But we've learned, and I think we're hearing less of that now. And I think we've learned, I don't think a lot of people realize, ever stop to think about, wow, I'm actually creating this feeling of hopelessness for people. And you, like Kim always says, don't let perfect be the enemy of good. You've got to do the best you can with what you've got. So that's kind of our focus with messaging. And I think it's getting better too in the TV world. James, I think I interrupted you. Sorry.
No, I mean, that's a great point. And I think if you go back to 1999, that was the first major metro tornado in Oklahoma in, first F5 since Idabel in 82, maybe. And then a whole new world of being able to visualize this tornado with helicopter and radar and chasers. So, I mean, everybody was completely out of any sense of familiarity and how to message something like that, I think. But I mean, my point, the closest I get to something like that is telling people, when you're seeing the supercell thunderstorms developing and looking down past a polygon, saying, if you live in a mobile home in Muskogee, an hour and a half, 2 hours ahead of this is the time you need to be heading over to a friend's house or to a well-built store or something like that. But again, I think you're totally right. The level of hopelessness that I think that unintentionally put on people was probably more harmful than beneficial.
And I just want to pop on and say, going back to what Amanda talked about just a little while ago and her passion for folks, what I wish the viewers and listeners would really just see is that we are not just getting on there to talk about pretty colors and lie to your face and all these different things that they think we're doing. We actually want to help you to save your life. That is why we do this. We're not trying to to make stuff up and all this. We're not trying to take you away from The Bachelor or your football game or whatever it is. We have a passion to do this. And so I want to just thank you, Amanda, for your passion, and to Josh. Thank you guys so much. And to the National Weather Service, I say this every opportunity I can. Thank you for your service. We cannot do what we do without you. Thank you.
And none of us signed up to have weird hours, shift work. I mean, the people that are good at this job anywhere in the weather enterprise have this in their bones. This is not just a job. My point I was going to make about what I saw Josh and Amanda doing, that for discussion, we know that people learn and process information differently. Some people are verbal processors, some visual, and different phrasing matters. And I think what Josh and Amanda did really well, which is a lesson that I will take here, hopefully never have to use, is they were very quick, but repeating the same general message, but they were doing it in different ways. And I think that probably resonates with more people than mainly just say me running the whole show and monopolizing all the time.
Yeah, I really enjoy that back and forth aspect that we have. And that's something that we kind of Monday morning quarterback after every single event. It's not just something that we go, oh, we did it. Okay, it's done. On to the next event. It's always a discussion. Okay, yeah, we did this, that, and the other really, really great. But what are the things that we could improve on the next time? And I think one of the only things that I've ever really remembered from either a consultant or from a coach after going back is that as broadcast meteorologists, we don't practice. You know what I mean? If you're a football player, you go to practice before your game. For us, our practice is the daily 3-minute weather hit or the first minute weathers that we do. And then we're in this long form coverage for hours and hours and hours. So we really are the only profession where the only practice we get is the repetition of actually doing our jobs. And I think that obviously repetition and doing this for a long time, you learn things over time. But at the end of the day, I think being able to bounce off, Josh has made this point when we've kind of come together as a weather team after the fact to talk about what happened. You know, what I say and how I say it might really go to somebody at home and go, oh, I got that. Josh could be saying the exact same thing, but the way he says it or the words he chooses to say that might not resonate with everybody. But there's a group of people that Josh might resonate to, and I might resonate to, our weekend meteorologist, Nick, our morning meteorologist, Tyler. So that's the whole reason why we have a team of people, and it's important. And it's not just one person talking for hours and hours on end, because how I say things versus how Josh says them, we might be saying the same thing, but it might be interpreted differently, or it might give somebody that kind of call to action. Oh, okay, I've never heard it the way that Josh has said it before. When he puts it that way, that really makes me want to take action. So I think it's really important, and for us to kind of go back and we get critiques all the time on beautiful days and on stormy days. And most of it is just people talking for the sake of talking, but really taking constructive criticism from viewers and saying, hey, you know, I really liked when you did that. Or, hey, you know, when you said that, that was kind of confusing and I didn't really quite understand that. And being able to take that and then put it into the next storm is really important.
And I think that's critical, using the kind of the game analogy of practicing. I mean, what you're talking about is really essentially like a football coach watching game film after a game and kind of reviewing what went well and what didn't. And that's another thing I think a lot of people don't realize that meteorologists do, that we do go back and analyze events. I know Kevin and John and John and Jason are very familiar with this. This is something Weather Service offices do a lot, is go back and run simulations of that case again. So critical to watch that game film and learn from your mistakes, learn what worked, learn what didn't.
You know, Rick, that's really interesting. For people who aren't familiar, when you say go back and run simulations, what does that look like? What all do you guys do?
Well, it could range anything from just getting together informally a couple of days after the event to look at some radar data and say, here were some decision points, or here's some feedback we got from partners on what they did, or what worked, what didn't work. And the more further down the road, someone like Kevin or Todd in our office are collecting data from these cases and going back and running simulations on our weather event simulator, so that forecasters who didn't work the event can actually go back and get to those same decision points as the data is revealed to them simulated real time. So they're looking at the data. So it's just an effort to kind of give everybody as much experience as possible from the event to help us all be better.
And when there's stuff going on in other parts of the country, it's quiet here in Alabama, we're all sitting there watching on the radar and talking about it on ourselves too, watching.
Yeah, we've done that before too. We had one day when you guys were having a big outbreak a couple of years ago where we just got on Google Meet or Google Chat and just watched the event along with you, looked at radar data, looked at chat, not in a critical way, but just looking at what you're going through in real time and learning from it. We can learn so much. And I think lots of meteorologists do that. I mean, we'd be doing this if we weren't getting paid for it. You'd probably be sitting home geeking out, looking at radar scope anyway. So it's, you can learn a lot from events not in your area.
And I would say too, there are going to be people who watch this who are in hiring positions in television, whether they're chief meteorologist or whatever. Please try to get a diversity of viewpoints and communication techniques on your weather team. I am a 40-year-old guy from Jacksonville, Alabama. I grew up watching James Spann. I used to email James. Those 20 free hour CDs that AOL sent? Those were the worst thing that ever happened to him, man. I fired that computer up when I was like 15 and was emailing him and said, hey, I want to do this. This is so cool. And he helped me so much and still does. But my voice is different than Amanda's. Amanda's from New Hampshire. And to borrow a football analogy, each person on your team is sort of like a different type of alignment or formation, and that will help you sort of attack some of the defenses that are up, whether it be resignation that we've talked about today, whether it be, I don't care about this kind of stuff, whether it be, I don't think I have time to reach my safe place. If you can say those things in a different way, you can help knock down some of those walls, those paths of resistance that we encounter. So do that. Hire people who communicate differently. Your viewers will be better served for it.
James, you're mentioning that you're, there and you've helped us, as events begin and sent us email messages, things you notice in real time, text messages, because you have a tremendous amount of experience and expertise. And it's been so helpful the times that you've shared that with us when we've been in the heat of the battle.
It's like the National Weather Service is doing this. Central Region, in fact, has an intentional program of just kind of radar co-piloting or mesoscale meteorology co-piloting. I've texted Josh before. He didn't need my help.
Yes, he did.
Not at all. He didn't need my help at all. He's decoding side lobe contamination of velocity. And I've just texted him and said, I think you're right. No,
let me brag on James. That's what I'm going to do. I'm going to brag on everybody.
No.
James ate a lot, might be the best radar meteorologist that I know. He is masterful at this. And I've learned
He's not
so
just
much.
saying that. He's said that to our team multiple times before all of this is unraveled. So this isn't just Josh on the spot, just saying it for the sake of talking.
I don't usually ever do that. So
plus he's just helpful when you have a question. And I have had a couple of questions in the last couple of weeks. You don't want to bother people and you don't want to drive them crazy, but he gave me thoughtful, helpful responses. I was kidding about my GR, back here, he, helped me upgrade, the GR2 so that I had the new PTDS product and, helped me with some great place files that I didn't have and some color tables. And Kevin's helped me with some great color tables, and everybody wants to be helpful, I think. So that's really cool. All right. Now, let's see. Have we covered everything? I want to get back around here. Talk about the stats from, Kim, did you get to get your question in?
It's okay. Yeah, I'll do it really quickly. One of the things that I heard you guys talk about was about the Weather Service suite of products, right? We have sort of this watch to warning continuum. And Josh, you were talking about people, if you need more than 5 minutes, you've got to go, sooner. And you're saying, well, I guess we have to lean on the watch. But watches can go on for the whole day. That's a lot of time. I'm curious to know what you guys feel you might do. Are there things that you're trying to do to message in that time in between, where we know that a lot of people need to be making their decisions and actually doing the things you're trying to motivate them to do? You're talking, I mean, you guys have spoken so eloquently too about reaching different audiences and being motivational and helping them to understand they play a critical role in protecting their families and all of this. But the watch sort of falls short of the needs in the decision timeline. So what are you doing? Because I think you are doing things. Let's talk about that. What do you do when it's more like an hour or two, and it's a little bit more of these couple of counties, this area, what's going on?
We try to lead the polygon in a situation like this where we have a long track tornado and we know where it's roughly going to end up. We will send targeted, customized video updates on our weather app, and we can draw it on a map and just basically extend out the polygon. And very intentionally will say, if you live in mobile or manufactured housing in the next county over, now's the time you need to be moving. Now's the time you need to act. And that's a little more on that time scale, kind of that between what you're talking about there, between the watch and the warning. So that's something we started doing after Beauregard, because the way that polygon worked out with Beauregard being in the western part of the county and the tornado hadn't produced, or the storm hadn't produced a tornado up until basically it got over Lee County. That was a thing we learned, was if we are in a big, ugly day with a massive supercell that we know is going to be producing strong tornadoes, maybe many of them, sort of say that. Get on your weather app. And that's the cool thing about whether it's a weather app or a Facebook page or social media, we've never had more ways to reach people on an individual kind of scale, where maybe we're not in continuous coverage yet, but we're going to be soon. And we'll say that. We'll send out a weather app alert. Hey, this is really going to get bad after 9:30 in Elmore County. This is really going to get bad after 10:30 in Tallapoosa County. So that's a way we've attacked it.
One thing I used to challenge our folks with is, once we go under a watch, we have a certain segment of people who probably are weather weenies who follow us on social media anyway. You guys on television probably have tenfold the followers that we have, if not more. I actually challenge our folks, hey, send this out on Twitter if you don't mind for me, because I don't have anything to do with it, so I'll make other people do it. So I'm just like, hey, send this out for me right now. You're under a watch. What are you doing right now? And do you know somebody who doesn't keep up with the weather that you can call and talk to them about this? So I would challenge all you television folks to try something like that the next time you're under a watch. Hey, what are you doing right now? Do you even know you're under a watch? And do you know somebody you can call who may not be weather aware to let them know as well?
I think one thing that you guys did at the National Weather Service in Birmingham, and I think, Kevin, it was you in chat who prodded the meteorologist, okay, start talking about the next town. And this was probably 2 polygons away. Okay, start messaging the danger for this town. And I thought that was fantastic, because a lot of times in media, and I'm sure Amanda and Troy and Josh and James will admit this, we can get hyper focused on one thing and really racked into this. Maybe we use street level radar too much. I don't know, but that's just an example of just being too hyper focused on something and not looking downstream far enough. And so I thought that was a great, just kind of a reminder. You just poked the media Mets just a little bit. Hey, talk about message of the danger for this town that's 40 miles downstream. And I thought that was a great practice.
I think one of my philosophies, I didn't actually communicate this event. Gerald Satterwhite, one of our other forecasters, did, but my philosophy in chat is to do a play-by-play. I'm sitting in the middle of operations and I'm hearing the radar operators talk about the current cells. I'm hearing the other forecasters talk about the mesoscale, and I'm kind of brokering all that information and putting it in a play-by-play into chat, so that I know you guys are looking for things to talk about. So
Mhm.
I'm offering that up as expert, subject matter expertise for you guys to take. And to be honest with you, I do it consciously. Yes, I want this message to go out. So I type it in there. And guess what y'all do? You get that message out, and it's teamwork right down the line.
And specifically, I think what James is probably talking about is when the National Weather Service specifically asked us to hit Alex City hard.
Precisely.
Alex City is a city in Tallapoosa County that was, I guess, probably 35, 45 miles away from where the deaths occurred in Otaga. And especially in TV world, when we get news of fatalities, news managers want to send crews and everything kind of stops and zeroes in on those fatalities. But from a weather enterprise perspective, I can't help those people. Their loss is tragic and heartbreaking, but I've got to focus on what happens next. And the National Weather Service, our Birmingham office guys, you were talking about Gerald and just Kevin and John and Jason. I don't know who's in charge of recruiting at your office. It must be Kirby Smart or Nick Saban or somebody, because you guys have just a top to bottom group that's better than most. And we appreciate you. But that was a great example. We had no fatalities in Alex City out of that tornado, which that was still a sizable tornado when it moved over Alexander City. And Alex City has a much larger population than any place in Otaga County that got hit by this tornado. And I'm convinced that you doing that probably allowed some people in Alex City to blow out candles on the birthday cake next year.
Hey, Josh, and I don't think we should have hit this at the top of the show. I don't think people listening to us, we've described the loss of life, exactly what happened. So kind of describe the loss of life in Otaga County for those that don't know what happened.
Yeah, we had 7 people that lost their life in a community called Old Kingston. It's kind of in the middle of the county. In Otaga County, Alabama. That's a little northwest of Montgomery. Most of the population in that county is in the southeastern corner in the city of Prattville, but the area that it hit is still it is still fairly populated, from Old Kingston over to Marbury. And we had 7 people lose their lives in that tornado there. Close to where it first touched down, Kevin did the survey. The touchdown was just west of US Highway 82. And then from there, it seemed like the fatalities, Kevin, were probably within the first, 10, 15 miles of the track.
Yeah, it wasn't unlike Beauregard. Same thing. It was like that first few miles there, it was pretty intense. And in fact, if it had hit something more substantial, we would have probably been arguing over an EF4 versus an EF3. It's just a matter of the way the trees were debarked and mowed down. But I think I made 2 mistakes in this one. Let me tell you what they were. One sort of not my fault. One was my fault. And my fault was I should have pulled the trigger on tornado emergency for Selma, and I didn't do it. Probably based on just the fact that the velocities weren't quite where I wanted them to be.
Kevin, for people listening that aren't aware of the situation that day, the same parent storm dropped a tornado that hit Selma, which was a pretty good population center. That tornado lifted, got back down in Otaga County. So you might kind of backtrack in the fact that we did have a tornado come through Selma, but in the Selma tornado, Kevin, we had no loss of life.
But we could have.
Miracle.
And the second, I think was not my fault, was at the same time Selma was really getting going, the Chilton County warning was set to expire. And our software has a big limitation, which I hate. Are you listening? I hate it. Send me a letter about it. And that is, when we get within a certain time period, we can no longer cancel the warning. It has to stay out. I can't stand that about our software. So we have the one big advantage on the communication front, is that we see all the TV stations up in front of us. So I can see what you guys are focusing on. And I was like, this bounce back between Chilton County and Selma is not working for me. And that's why I jumped on the chat and said, get off Chilton County, get on Selma now, because I didn't want the Chilton County warning out at all anyway, because it was over, but there's nothing I could do from a software limitation. So that was the problem I was having there. And that's the heartburn that I was expressing there in chat in the last minute, that, hey, get on Selma now. We don't want to see anything about Chilton anymore, because I have that advantage of seeing what everybody's focused on. So I think that paid off, because it looked like everybody started really, with Richard Scott, Josh, James, Wes, Wyatt at Fox 6, and see them all up there. CBS 40, everybody started focusing on Selma, and I was happy to see that. And that was right at the sort of the go time for people in downtown Selma, which was very critical.
But let's remember, Kevin, we had success in Selma. I mean, nobody died there. The warning process worked very well, and there could have been serious loss of life in Selma.
Tell us about Sharon Reed, Kevin.
I'm hoping you guys can get Sharon on in a couple weeks. She couldn't come tonight. She's busy, but she is the director of the Cornerstone Daycare there on West Dallas Avenue, which is Highway 22, and that daycare took a direct hit on the nasty side of the storms. It was on the leading edge there on the downwind side, I guess, as the tornado is coming at you. So of all the places in Selma, that was probably the highest rated, right in there, about 125, 130. And unfortunately, the way the daycare was laid out structurally, the lobby area, which is always, the beautiful part of the building, glass and enclosures and things, was westward facing, almost southwestward facing. I think what happened was the wind blew into that lobby. And then once the wind was in the building, it just compromised the entire structure. And that's the way it looked like from an engineering standpoint. Now, I don't want to tell her story. It's her story to tell, but I'll tell you this: we don't talk about it enough. There's a lot of heroes out there who we talk about our campaign Be a Hero, and she certainly was in that event because she made the extra decision. We talk about people who don't act. Let's talk about people who do act. And she made some extra decisions there that saved a lot of people at one time. And I'm going to tell you, if she hadn't made those decisions, it'd been a totally different outcome there. And I dare say the loss of life could have been a lot higher with that storm. So versus zero. So it was good.
John DeBlock, you started that Be a Hero, I think. Talk about that. That messaging really resonated with us, and we use it a lot.
I think that goes along with what Josh is saying, that we do have the power to influence the outcome of this event. It's similar to the Weather Ready Nation ambassador. Everybody, who wants to save somebody's lives? Would you like to save somebody's life today? That's a great question. And the answer is yes, I'd love to save somebody's life. Well, then tell them that the storm is coming. Make sure everybody you know and love is aware of the situation that's unfolding today. Get their attention somehow. Ask them where they're going to go to shelter, what their plans are if the tornado comes into their area. Just be that hero. Be that person that makes the connection, that connects the dot between people in their busy lives with what's going on with the weather today.
And Sharon told me, they'd already gotten the warning for trying to take precautions, go in the hallway, but somebody called her and said, "Hey, it's in Safford, head your way." And then she took heightened precautions to get them all in those, even the restrooms and closets.
Yeah, this is an amazing story, and I hope we can talk to Sharon soon, because we were all so inspired by that, and it's just a fantastic thing. Kevin, John, talk about the stats. How did the Weather Service do that day on the metrics that you tracked?
Well, the POD was 100% for sure, but I think we had one or two false alarms in there, but it was Marengo County before the storm got to Selma, and then which I find unbelievable considering that signature that was down in South Marengo County. And then I think there was another one maybe in Walker County, but I think that was probably about the only two. The rest of them were pretty much associated with something. I mean, we didn't even talk about Greensboro. That one was pretty bad too. So it was awful, just hitting there in downtown Greensboro as well. So there was a couple pretty nasty ones that day. I think Selma sort of got all the attention. But one thing too, and I've heard a couple comments about the rating in Selma being EF2. It just didn't quite meet the higher end. So maybe the tornado emergency was the right call after all. But I surveyed both Selma and John and I both surveyed Selma and Autauga County. There's just a level of difference between the damage in Autauga County versus the damage in Selma. It's just on another level. So you can definitely tell when it reaches that benchmark of 150 miles an hour versus 120. It's really a bit. 30 miles an hour makes a big difference.
There's some very, very old trees in Selma. It's just a tragedy from the beauty of the city, and all the old homes and everything down there. Some of these large, 150-year-old trees probably falling down in the neighborhoods and on the houses. On the other hand, we kind of have to wonder, did that help to essentially shelter the structures, the tree canopy? What kind of an impact did that have on protecting the structures? There were very few structures that were directly impacted from the force of the wind of a tornado. There was a lot of sheltering in that tree canopy.
James Adelon?
Yeah, I was going to ask if we get a lot of second guessing on social media about, I can't believe you assigned it an EF2. That's clearly an EF3. I mean, Paducah was really bad about that. That EF4, EF5 decision, there was a lot of noise. In the end, it doesn't matter, but people still want to chime in and say that, I guess.
We'll never hear the end of 2011 in Tuscaloosa being EF4. Even though it was corroborated 3 different times with 3 different engineering groups, it doesn't matter. It's always going to be that. It probably was. Let me say, it probably was an EF5 when it got out in the woods, when it hit that the train
that bridge.
Out there. Yeah, and when it hit that train trestle, that was at the Holt Peterson Bridge, but it definitely wasn't when it was in the city of Tuscaloosa, when it actually had structures where we could measure, get a better estimate of the winds there. So, but 3 different independent engineering groups, I'll just put on the record, looked at that 3 different times and came up with the same exact answers independently. So I feel pretty good about what rating we had. By the way, we had that rating the same as they did. So I feel pretty good about what we do. And we just, we don't go out there. It's not a game to us. We don't go out there and just make it up and just try to make it the worst thing possible. We're just going to be as factual and as scientific as we can possibly be. That's all we can do.
Dr. Jacobs, you're gonna ask a question there about Kevin's complaint.
Yeah, fix this, Dr. Jacobs. You can fix this software problem. Help this man, please.
I was just curious if it was an AWIPS thing or the software you're referencing was a different package.
I was going to say, Dr. Jacobs has helped me enough in my career, so I'll leave it at that. Maybe it's too soon for that. It's always been there with, I think the AWIPS, the WarnGen software itself was probably just, it was built by engineering folks, not weather people. So it's, the polygons are strange. Let's say the default polygons are strange, the way they designed the whole system and sort of the way I think it behaves, but it's I don't really know what the reason is. Maybe it's a weather radio problem or something, but there's something when you get into certain windows, and James A is right as well. It does it with the watches too. When you get in a certain time period to go, you can't do anything with them anymore. You can put out wording like the watch is expiring, the warning expiring, but you can't erase it off the books until it's officially gone according to time. So.
And talking about stats, Kevin, John, Jason, what were the lead times like? They seem to be pretty good from our standpoint.
I'll let John.
The lead time for downtown Selma was 36 minutes. The warning was issued at 28 past the hour, and it hit downtown Selma at 18 past the next hour. So if I do my math correctly, that's 36 minutes. And of course, on a day like that, when you identify a supercell, the lead times become not quite like shooting fish in the barrel. You still have to pull the trigger and everything, but it's very, it's a good warning environment, a target-rich environment for getting those lead times. So, but that's, those are the days that lead time is extra important. It's going to make a big difference.
And John DeBlock, just know we're not laughing at you when. If we start laughing when you say something, it's because James Adelot has said something funny. And you have to say what you just said, James. You got to share it with the group.
I said, I was told there would be no math.
Talk more about other heroes. I know Sharon has gotten a lot of attention as a hero. Josh, Amanda, I know y'all met lots of people after the storms. I know the Weather Service survey teams, Kevin's already talked about, someone he met. Talking about other heroes you met.
I think a lot of the school administrators were heroes on this day. It was a kind of an atypical event for us. Lately it seems like we're in the mode of overnight events. We're talking about letting the kids out, canceling the after school activities and the evening activities. This was hitting 7 a.m. in the Northwest and progressing through the day. And it was going to be a quick hitting event. It wasn't one of these typical 12, 18-hour events. You're under a threat, 3 or 4 watches. It was one watch and you're done. The storm gets past you and it's over. So we had a number of educators and administrators in education that were making decisions. I know the Demopolis schools made a decision to cancel the night before. That's a good environment because it gives the parents an opportunity to arrange for daycare. They can still take care of the kids and get to work, and they don't have to worry about their kids being out. On the other side of the coin, there were some schools that were in session that were beginning to make decisions for early release. Kevin identified that as an issue to me, and I got on the radio with the emergency manager to say, "Hey guys, if your counties are talking about dismissing right now, please call us before you do that." A lot of the counties, the bus routes take 2 hours, and the way this line was moving, there was no way that the bus runs were going to be complete before the storms got through. The emergency manager in Autauga County, Ernie Baggett, he made the decision and coordinated with his schools. He made the comment that the tornado went right through some of the bus stops that would have been perhaps activated in use at the time when the tornado came through. So there were a lot of people that made decisions. Everything didn't go right, but a lot of things did go right where schools made the decision to shelter in place. I think, we always struggle, and I think you're going to be looking at a conversation in the office here. We're talking about bringing it up at the IAEM meeting next year and having a panel discussion. What do you do? Is it better for the children in your community to be in a school with the attention of an adult telling them what to do and where to be, or is it better for them to be sent home in the middle of the day where they're going to get home and jump on the Xbox and not paying attention? Mom and dad might not be able to be there. So there's very difficult decisions. So the people that made those decisions, man, they're heroes. They're always wrong. It's just like, they're going to be wrong by somebody's account on whatever decision they make. But I think there were some really good decisions made that led to saving lives.
All right. Every time I'm on the show, I get a nasty gram. You ready for it? Here it comes. All right. These schools, they play politics way too much. And I don't like to say it. I've heard it through back channels and things, but these schools, and there's something about getting money, federal money, and not having to make the day up and all this stuff that comes into account. And it's something about feeding them lunches. I don't know if any of these rumors are true, but if they're true, it's ridiculous. You guys have got to make better decisions, not based on whether you can get a whole day counted, whether it's going to be a state of declared a natural disaster or whatever, whatever the governor has to claim where you don't have to make the school day up. But this happens over and over again. I see it. And we started to see it that day. And that's why I got John in there at 8 o'clock. I think Winston County happened pretty early. They started seeing that, oh crap, we need to do something. They started panicking. Well, we're going to release at noon today. Why at noon? Because you're going to feed them lunch and you're trying to get this day counted. And I started getting aggravated about it because it was getting in the way of what we were trying to do. And I think that's why we tried to stop it. But they got to quit playing politics with the way with these storms and the way it goes. And I understand they're under immense pressure, but you can't send kids home unsupervised to mobile home communities. You cannot do it. Do not do it, please.
And there's the litigious aspect as well from the lawyers that don't want anybody to get injured or worse on the school property. And with the new law after 2011, we have some of the school districts that have a mix of schools that have shelters and schools that don't. So the decision becomes even more challenging for them. So that's something I think we need to, our society needs to take a good hard look at and figure out what their decision-making process is and to identify it, whatever works for that community. I'm not going to judge whether a community decides to dismiss or cancel school or stay in school, as long as that decision is right for that community.
We've got a lot of questions going back and forth in the chat. James A., ask your question.
Yeah, I was asking Rick if there's any other states, Oklahoma in particular, that shelter schools from that liability, kind of like what Alabama is pushing toward. I mean, that litigation threat is certainly, it looms in all of our heads about stuff. Not just
James,
this.
I'll also say one of the reasons why Rick put in chat that he doesn't know the answer to that. One of the reasons why we wouldn't know the answer to that is, do you know, before the Moore tornado in 2013, May 20th, 2013, do you know when the last time was that there'd been a school hit during the school day in Oklahoma?
50s?
Even before. It was the 1920s. It had
Wow.
been almost 100 years, because we have a very narrow climatological window during which most of our tornadoes occur, and it's the evening. That's not the case in Alabama. You guys have a much larger climatological window, and times of year too. We have a very strong seasonality to our tornadoes that you don't have. And so, yeah, it's just a very, very different problem. I just wanted to chime in with that because, yeah, Rick's like, I have no idea. I don't know that anyone in Oklahoma even is that concerned about this. But it is absolutely a concern in Alabama. And you all, this calculus you're talking about the litigious nature, what's safest for your kids and who bears the liability? Yeah, you are ground zero for that very specific question.
And a lot of this came from Enterprise in 2007, okay, where you had some loss of life in a high school. And all these media nitwits from Los Angeles and New York came down. All these morons from Alabama, they should have sent them home. That the blood is on the hands of the superintendent and the principal. These stooges don't even know how the whole thing works. They don't understand it. If they would have sent those kids home, the death toll would have been over 100. Those kids are going to go home, play video games, not pay attention. They're going to be in their cars. Where at the school, most of them were sheltered. You had heroes in that building. Nobody wanted to tell the story of these heroes, but that's what started a lot of this stuff, was going back to 2007. And I think there was some litigation involved in that. And what Kevin Law said is true. I'm going to clip that and play it for everybody. Kevin, that was great. That was the greatest sermon I've heard in a while.
That was.
One thing.
Johnson, I know you need to go, so let's say goodbye to you. We're so thrilled we got to have you. Thanks for bringing Amanda along. Amanda, please stay if you can. But if you need to go, feel free. But Josh, thank you again for being here tonight.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. This has been a fantastic conversation. Honestly, I think it could last for hours.
And it might.
Hey, Josh, you did an excellent job. It was outstanding, incredible. So thanks for your work that day.
We have a great
our
team.
Our mouths were open here watching you, Josh. You and Amanda both. Amanda was extremely impressive, and the play between the two of you was amazing. And
she did a fantastic job. And I want to give a big shout out to, he can't make it because he's going to become a daddy in about 12 hours, we think. Our morning met Tyler Seabury from Ohio State. He did a lot better job than they did against Georgia. He had a fantastic, fantastic showing. He's a smart guy too. So I'm really lucky. Absolutely. All I have to do is stay out of the way. So thanks for having me, everyone. Have a wonderful night. Let's do it again soon.
Come back soon, Josh.
Bill, one thing that Josh did, and Amanda too, I've watched them do a lot of severe weather coverage, and they leave some on the volume scale. Not everything's a 10. And so they had urgent messaging that people hadn't seen before, not since Beauregard. And so they had room to dial it up. And I think viewers key in on that. Oh, I've not heard him like this. This is not like every other one that he's been on. And I think that is, that's a very skilled thing to do.
And let me say this. I hope everybody heard what Josh said. He said something really important here. There's a lot of people I've seen on television and YouTubers and the TikTokers where they're condescending toward people that live in trailers. What's the matter with you? Let me tell you something about people that live in trailers. Most of them are more at peace with their lives than you are, wherever you live, okay? They live a wonderful life. Mobile homes are wonderful, affordable housing. They live a great existence. They have a great life. They love living there. They're at peace. For a lot of people, it's money they have and it's peace they lack. And don't you dare, be condescending towards somebody because they live in a trailer. So what? you've got to, you need to spend time with them. Most of the people that are condescending toward people living in trailers, they've never been in one. They've never been a guest in somebody that lives in a manufactured house, that lives in Old Kingston or East Aboga or Andalusia or Op. I'm telling you, you've got to get to know these people and get and have a real empathy for them and understand for a lot of them, they don't even have transportation. And you're getting there fussing about because they're not leaving. Well, maybe they can't leave. There's just a lot of issues here. And that's why you've got to understand the people. But what Josh said was really important. And Josh and Amanda in the group, they've done a great job of that. And we just all have to be better at that. I've seen so much, it makes me sick, some of the things I've seen across social media about people living trailers and tornadoes. And it even gets political. They talk about they're mega idiots and Trumpers and all this. Are you kidding me? We're here to mitigate loss of life, period. I don't care if you live in a mansion, in a trailer, if you're left wing, right wing, whatever. We've got to move on here. And those people that live in trailers, if they see they're being talked down to, they're going to think you're a pinhead, and they're not going to listen to you. You've got to have you have to establish a relationship with the people that you serve. And it's not going to happen the day of the event. It's going to happen weeks and months and years leading up to it, by being in their community, by being in their schools, by being in the Dollar General where you talk to them. I'm sorry, Bill, I'm getting preachy. I just had to reinforce what Josh said.
And an
I love
asterisk
it.
on that is we all need to be on the same team, and we cheer for the people, not the storm. You see that a
Bingo.
lot on social media too. That drives me crazy.
Exactly.
And and the messaging Josh does too is this rotation is getting stronger, not getting better. That drives me crazy when I hear that. This storm's not getting better. This is worse. We're all ranting and raving now. Way to go,
And
James.
one of our listeners, Steve Holmes, asked the question: more and more TV Mets are estimating the strength of a tornado while it's going on using the height of the debris signature. How reliable is that? Who wants to take that on?
That's a Kevin Laws question.
Yeah, Jackson, Mississippi office has done a lot of the groundwork on a lot of that. So they've shared things with us, and just in general terms, it's hard for me to even remember what it was like before dual boil, to be honest with you, because I've gotten so used to it now. But it's so underrated, by the way. We don't talk about that enough, how it's really changed what we do in almost every aspect. But there's some correlation to that for sure. To me, it's hard to do in real time sometimes too, Bill. You can scan up in a storm and you can sort of make it out. Sometimes you can. Sometimes it's after effect. It sort of takes quite a few minutes before you can get to reach those heights. So it may have already been that intense. But for me, and Jason can chime in as well, because he works a lot with me on the warning desk, and we'll have the conversation back and forth. A lot of us will have it sitting over there in our little radar pit with each other about what we're seeing. And it's a combination for me of the velocity, rotational velocity, obviously. And then it's also what the reflectivity structure looks like with that velocity, like the debris ball itself. And then, of course, with the TDS added to it now, we have 4 levels. We have radar, we have the Doppler indicator, we have the radar confirmed, and then we have considerable, then we have catastrophic, which is the tornado emergency. So there's really 4 levels that we have to pick from. And I think we're putting in chat too, some of that we were seeing debris up to 12,000, 16,000 feet, some of it 20,000 feet. And so the evidence is EF3 plus once you get into that. And I think we saw that, but I thought I'd made a mistake there in Selma with the not issuing tornado emergency. I wasn't going to make the same mistake in the talk when I saw it recycling. Sometimes I've seen that before too, and I don't really have a good thought in my head about the science behind it. But sometimes it's these long track supercells on the second cycle is always worse than the first cycle. I don't know why, but when you have a cycling storm, be very wary of that second and even sometimes the third one, because those seem to be the ones that carry the most damage. And so I wasn't going to make that mistake again, even though those tracks were pretty close to touching there at the Talbot County, Dallas County line, where it did lift for about 10 to 12 miles. on radar, you could definitely see it lifted, the debris signature started over, whatever. And I think I was sort of anticipating, had the tornado emergency ready to go because I knew how bad it was in Selma and already anticipating in Autauga County it's going to be that bad. I don't know if I've heard from Kim and others that the language does make a difference, but I think it's more not what we do, it's what is projected out and what you guys carry on television that makes a huge difference for us as far as going to that extra step of a tornado emergency. Unfortunately, didn't pay off all the way in this case, but maybe it did, in places like Coosa County and Tallapoosa County downstream. Those are some pretty high-end damage, especially in southern Coosa there as well. So anyways, that was sort of my thoughts on it, but we could sort of get an idea ahead of time with the way that debris looks and the way it's being lofted for sure.
And Kevin, I think that we all hit it the same level, whether it was a considerable or catastrophic tornado emergency PDS. We don't, a lot of times we don't have time to even pay attention to that when we're communicating the information. We were hitting it just as hard. Would you agree, Amanda? I mean, you were there as it was going into Selma. You were making the same message, whether it was catastrophic or considerable at that point, weren't you?
Yeah, and I think words are really important. It's a balance between, you don't want people to only take strong EF3, 4s, and 5s seriously and then not take the EF1 or 2. We say very much a lot on TV, it only takes one storm. And if that storm moves over you, that is the most impactful storm of your life, whether it's an EF0 or an EF5. So there's definitely a delicate balance between knowing that your words have power and meaning. So not necessarily trying to take away the importance of knowing that an EF0, an EF1, or an EF2 could be impacting you. But obviously, once you get up to the point where you're seeing debris being lofted, you get gate to gate cheer. I just think the magnitude of seeing numbers that are not something you see every single day. I think that is just another extra layer of saying, okay, this isn't a normal event. Like we had mentioned earlier when we talked about the fact that these storms were moving out ahead of the main line. And we say 99% of the time, Alabama's not the kind of place you go chasing because most storms are rain wrapped. And this is a storm that you could physically see coming. So that's one, not normal, because most of the storms that we see are not like that. But then being able to balance that between, okay, yes, this information is very much critical for us to realize that people's lives are in danger, but not necessarily downplaying that, oh, if it was weaker than this, then it would be okay. All tornadoes obviously need to be taken seriously. So it's a delicate balance between wanting people to understand this is not a typical normal situation, but I mean, when is Alabama ever typical or normal? Let's be honest.
Amanda, talk for just a minute. I know we probably never asked Kevin and Jason and John as many times we've had them on the show. We probably never asked them how they got into weather, but we usually ask our meteorologists that at the beginning. We're fascinated by your background. Tell us how you got into weather.
So I remember first day of like meteorology 101 freshman year, sitting in class with like 25 other weather weenies and everybody going around saying it was this blizzard, it was this hurricane. And obviously being from the Northeast, a lot of it was snow and winter related. Me, it was just when I was a kid, I used to always look up at the clouds and I was like, what are those? And I tell kids when I go to school visits that your parents don't ever lie to you unless you ask them what clouds are made up of. Because my mom said they were cauliflower and cotton candy. And I was like, that seems suspect. I'm gonna investigate that. So I just really took every single science class that I could. Was always just really good at math. I know math is a very polarizing thing. You either love it or you hate it. So the combination of that, I really like talking. I know that's probably very hard for people at home to ever understand. I talk for a living, and my mom's a nurse and my dad's a retired police officer. So seeing service-based kind of examples of people doing jobs where they serve other people, it kind of just was, to not be punny, this perfect storm of weather was always just a hobby. I was always very fascinated, wanted to know more. The first time I went on an airplane when I was 10, we went to Disney. I threw up because I was so excited. Like the night before, I was like, I'm going to be in the clouds. This is amazing. So it's just kind of this perfect storm. And then ninth grade came along and we had to do a project in a computer class. They're like, make a pamphlet of what you'd want to do for a living. And I remember asking my teacher, Mr. McDonough, I was like, so what, if I like weather, what would I do? He's like, it's called a meteorologist. You could be a meteorologist. So I'm sitting on my computer doing the research and I'm like, oh, this is where I could go to school. This is what I could do. Oh, I could work for the National Weather Service. I could be a broadcast meteorologist. I could be a private forecaster. So that's kind of where it all came together. And then it just kind of spiraled out of control from there. And I I couldn't think of anything else to do. People always like, if you weren't on TV, what would you do? I'm like, I don't know. I have no
There is nothing
idea.
else.
So I'm glad this dream worked out, because if it didn't, I think I'd be a good greeter at Walmart, because I love people. So I love talking to people. So I mean, that could be a little side hustle for me. But so I didn't necessarily take the traditional track where, oh, I was scared of weather and I wanted to know more, or I was impacted by an event. It was just it just started by looking up at the sky. Who would have known?
All right. So Amanda, what's your favorite place to eat in the Gump? I have to ask one final question.
Goodness.
Favorite place to eat in the Gump?
Okay, you have to be more specific. Like, what are we eating? Are we eating barbecue? Are we eating burgers?
It doesn't matter. Just pick some spot. Like you're cruising through the Gump and you got to stop somewhere. Where are you going to stop?
Oh gosh, we just ate at
Now,
Martin's.
I would say Chris's Hot Dogs, the old place on Dexter. That thing has been there forever.
We're on Dexter Avenue now. We're right across. We're kind of like catty corner to the Capitol. So Chris's is right down the street. I mean, just like classic. There's also a place a couple of blocks away from downtown called Hamburger King. And it's just like, and this is not to throw shade on them, it's like the most basic burger, but there's something so amazing about it. Like I'm like, why is this incredible? It's just a regular old bun, a regular old patty, regular old toppings. You get like a canned soda and a bag of chips, and that's it. And they're only open for like 4 hours. I'd say that's probably my favorite burger place, but we just went to Martin's. I mean, you can't go wrong with their famous fried chicken. There's so many good meat. And I love Dirk's though. Filet and Vine Dirk's. It's like a grocery store, and like you could get any kind of craft beer you want, any kind of wine. And then it's like this cafeteria style, and their cheesy broccoli. Oh, I would do some really bad things to get cheesy broccoli during a severe weather event. I'd do some criminal things for that cheesy broccoli. That's how good it is.
So you don't get this on the other weather podcast. Only on this one do you get best places to eat in the Gump, okay?
WSFA unofficially stands for We Serve Food Always. So if you don't like food, that's like a non-negotiable. You can't work at WSFA. If you don't want to be constantly eating, if you don't want to constantly have food in the break room or in the newsroom, then this is probably not the station for you to work at.
Now, I will say, when I worked there 100 years ago, at the IGA back there behind the old building on Delano, they had the best cookies in the United States. I mean, those cookies were so stinking good. I mean, it just was so good. But having said all that, we do have to stop. We're out of time here. So what we're going to do, we're going to go to Tony Rice for his report. We're going to get Jen's This Week in Tornado History, and then we're going to come back and do picks of the week. We're going to do email next week. So everybody be thinking of a good pick of the week, something related to weather that's good, that's interesting, that people might want to latch on to here. So let's take a break. We're going to hear from Tony, and Jen will be right back as WeatherBrains rolls along.
Looking beyond the atmosphere, here's Tony Rice with your astronomy outlook.
Something interesting happened with comet C22E3 over the weekend. It sprouted a third tail. A comet's primary tail is made up of dust and gases that are ejected as it grows closer to the sun. This creates a thin atmosphere around the comet called a comma. The comma is stripped off by the solar wind, creating a tail that can stretch for millions of miles. If that comet survives long enough to enter the inner solar system where we are, somewhere around the orbit of Mars, the amount of ultraviolet light reaching the comet really increases, and that ramps up the ionization of carbon monoxide, which glows blue as it trails behind the comet in a distinct second tail. This blue ion tail of charged particles, it follows magnetic lines and the solar winds, causing it to, unlike the dust tail, point directly away from the sun. On rare occasions, a third tail, paradoxically pointing towards the sun, can sprout on comets as they get even closer. This is a trail of much larger neutrally charged particles. We're talking about 1 millimeter in size here. But is this tail really pointing towards the sun? This is actually an optical illusion, the result of viewing as Earth passes through the plane of the comet's orbit. Comet C22 is expected to brighten a bit more as it draws closer to Earth through the end of January. That anti-tail could even become more prominent as well. That's your astronomy outlook. Follow me at RTP Hokie for more spacey stuff like this.
This week in tornado history, a long-track deadly tornado occurred on January 23rd, 1969. In his book, The Tornado, Nature's Ultimate Windstorm, Thomas Grzoulis notes that the process that brought about using the Fujita scale to rate tornadoes can be traced to this event. This tornado devastated the town of Hazelhurst, Mississippi. It is the deadliest tornado on record in the month of January.
The official Storm Prediction Center database has a path length of 117.8 miles. The storm data narrative is extremely detailed, and we break all of that down in our summary at tornadotalk.com. Here are some of the damage details for the Hazelhurst area. Starting near Highway 51 south of town, the tornado completely flattened a quarter to half-mile wide area. Almost all the property was destroyed, yet just 100 yards to either side of the destruction, homes and businesses were left untouched. One family of 15 occupied a 4-room frame building atop of a bluff overlooking Lumber Mill Pond. Their home and most of the occupants were blown about 70 yards into the pond, along with other houses and people. In all, 18 persons were dumped into the pond. East of Hazelhurst in the Shady Grove area, the tornado destroyed several homes and buildings before quote-unquote skipping across the Pearl River. There were 11 deaths in Hazelhurst and 140 were injured. In total, 32 people were killed by this tornado and over 240 were injured. On WeatherBrains episode 695, we interviewed Steve Collins. He is a filmmaker and documentarian of the boy with a pop bottle on his head. He tells the tale of a young boy who warned the town of Hazelhurst that a disaster was to happen. He stated this years before the tornado. Those who interacted with him remember that everywhere he went, he had a glass Coca-Cola bottle balanced on the top of his head. It is a fascinating story. Check out episode 695 for the full interview. Calling all weather enthusiasts, join the AMS Weather Band and become part of the American Meteorological Society, whose members have been at the forefront of weather, water, and climate research for over 100 years. You'll get to go behind the scenes with the 10,000 plus scientists, broadcasters, educators, and researchers of the AMS. The AMS Weather Band brings together weather professionals and weather enthusiasts. Band members can grow their knowledge and appreciation of weather and climate by participating in virtual events, online discussions, Q&As, AMAs, webinars, photo contests, and more. AMS Weather Band gives you the opportunity to interact directly with those in the scientific community. Learn more and join the band today at amsweatherband.org.
So what we're going to do is just go straight to picks of the week here to save a little time. So let's go to Troy Kimmel down in Austin. Troy, I know you've been dreaming up something really good for us. Go.
Well, I kind of stumbled across this, and I'm sure that Kevin and perhaps John and Jason may have seen this, and Rick. But I happened to stumble across something from Central Region headquarters where they basically have taken the impact-based decision support graphics. And for the region anyway, they put them all into one place. And this is something I've seen for Central Region. And you can see whether the blocks are green, and that would be a WFO, National Weather Service, where you have a current IDSS graphics available, and red if they've expired. I like that idea, and it's especially true if you're working and looking at maybe different CWAs in your area. So I find that to be useful. I think it's experimental at this point in Central Region, but it's something I'd like to see nationwide.
Not a bad idea. Great pick, Troy. Let's get James Adelot before he has to go do Eyewitness News at 9 o'clock. James, what you got for us?
Well, I've got one, a viewer photo that Aaron Brackett got at KFOR in Oklahoma City of a cat pawing at an anemometer. And I wondered if it was a catabatic wind.
Oh, brother.
Oh boy.
My apologies.
Yeah, that's all right. Let's just go right to Dr. Jacobs and bail us out of this abyss.
I don't know if I can do that. I don't have this opportunity as much as I used to, but I wanted to give a big shout out to the Weather Service folks. So Kevin, John, Jason, and Rick, thank you so much for your service. I saw Chris at AMS, but I miss you guys. So give my best to the team down there. My pick of the week is the AMS Summer Policy Colloquium. Registration is open. It's early June. I'll be one of the instructors helping put it on with Paul and a few other people there, and it's pretty cool. You get to go to DC for a week and a half, learn all sorts of policy, things you want to know, things you probably didn't want to know. Get to go visit the House, the Senate, and see how the sausage is made. Pretty cool program that AMS puts on.
Yeah, that's awesome. Excellent. And again, we're going to put the link and the information up on the website, weatherbrains.com, for those that are listening. All right, Rick Smith, let's go to you. What you got for us?
My pick of the week is a link to everything you need to know about the National Storm Chaser Summit. We talk about storm chasers on the show a lot. There's a summit coming up in Midwest City, just outside Oklahoma City, early February. You can look at the agenda. Aside from one stray dud that somehow made it on the agenda, they've got an excellent group of speakers scheduled. So, and it's a great opportunity to learn about storm chasing. We have our opinions and our perceptions, but great group of people. So there is a virtual component too. So that's my pick.
And one stray dud is another show title candidate for this week. All right, Jen, what you got? Go.
So mine's a tweet from National Weather Service in Mobile about the postponement of the radar maintenance and the 2-week outage, because tomorrow is looking very interesting for sure. And it's definitely a weather aware day. So they have postponed it. Looks like they're going to wait until Wednesday to start that, and then they'll be out for 2 weeks. So that's my tweet.
Yeah, we talked earlier about the snow for Oklahoma, for Rick, and for James A., and ultimately into parts of Arkansas, Missouri, and the warm sector. If the warm sector can get inland from the Gulf, we could have some tornado activity on the Gulf Coast, and that's why the Mobile folks are anxiously watching this. And a pretty good wind event where we are, not related to storms, but gradient winds. It's a very dynamic system. But Jen, we'll put a link up on weatherbrains.com. Okay, Kim, what do you have for us?
My pick of the week is going to be a great session that I attended at AMS where it's a little bit self-serving, but it was the NOAA Program Priorities Town Hall, where the director of the National Weather Service, Ken Graham, and our AA, the assistant administrator for OAR, the research line that I'm in, and Mike Morgan, they all talked about the priorities NOAA is bringing into the next year and couple of years. And it really was a big focus on social and behavioral sciences, and a lot of really great discussion about how we serve, kind of what this conversation has been about today, how we serve the most vulnerable of our people and the people who most need our help. So I thought it was just a really wonderful and inspirational conversation, and that'll be my pick.
Absolutely. Good deal. All right. So Jason and John, the dynamic duo. Let's go to both you guys. Who's going first?
I'll kick it off. This Sentinel Hub EO browser. We examine these storm tracks, and there's just some rural places where we can't get any eyes on. So there's satellite data from the Sentinel-2 satellite that we use to fill in some of our servers. We also use aerial imagery as well when that's available. But some of the other sources that we bring to the table to analyze those storm tracks.
Awesome. All right, Jason, go. What you got?
I'll plug just our event webpage for the event. Let's be able to work pretty hard on those. Reviews all the tornadoes for the event, pictures and maps. And you can go back many years on that page and look at a lot of old events to see what happened. You can see some analogs popping up. It's a good way to see events that happened in our area.
That's a lot of manpower going into those things. Goodness gracious. I cannot imagine. Great picks. All right, Amanda, I know you got something good for us. Go.
Okay, really quick before we wrap things up, I just want to shout out to not just all of those people who live in Alabama who are impacted, but everybody across the nation. The Central Alabama Community Foundation, along with our station and Gray Media, has raised over $181,000 for those impacted, not just by the storms. January, we've had several different events, not just those in Autauga, Coosa, Elmore, Tallapoosa, Dallas counties. So appreciate everybody. We had tons of people from across the country help, neighbors helping neighbors. So shout out to everybody. We find that Alabamians and Southern hospitality is a true thing, especially in a time of need. And so we appreciate everybody shining a light on the events that have happened recently. Even though they were tragic events, we will come back stronger, and people show their true colors and how generous they really are when other people are in need.
Can people still give to this, or is it closed?
Yeah, no, our link is on WSFA.com, and we had a long drive where we got about 150,000, but in the past couple of days, we've increased another $14,000+ plus. So still time to donate. There's still a lot of reputable organizations as well that you can donate. So I know the people who were impacted by these events over the past couple of weeks really appreciate any help that anybody can offer.
Awesome. All right, great. We'll put a link up on weatherbrains.com. Kevin Laws, I know you got something good.
Yeah, Russ Shoemaker and his bunch out of Colorado State been working hard on their artificial intelligence and machine learning severe weather probability. So I give them a little shout out. Still kind of in the testing phase. I've been looking at it now for about a year, and it's doing quite well and really keeps up with it. So he basically mimics SPC's categorical forecast for the days 1 through 8, and he does it through machine learning and artificial intelligence. So through the models. So it's very interesting to take a look at some of his work.
Awesome. All right, Bill. Speaking of that, has anybody played with Chat GPT here? I mean,
I hear it's pretty fun.
I mean, Google's panicking. I mean, Google is in absolute panic, thinking that the end of their business model is ahead.
Academia needs to be very concerned with this.
Yeah, don't they?
Big trouble. I foresee this as being huge.
Yeah, I mean, I need to get on that thing and ask it, what's the chance of my house being hit by a tornado? And I live in Mobile. I'd love to see what it says. I just don't have time to play with it, but
it'll be in the format of a Shakespearean sonnet or something, James.
Yeah. Or I'm going to ask it to write a forecast discussion for Alabama, and let's see what it does with that. But that's a Dr. Neil Jacob. Neil, have you played with Chat GPT?
I was just talking to someone about it earlier today, and there's already algorithms that can detect what it creates because it's already been attempted to use writing term papers.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
We'll see.
Kim, say what you said there in chat. I think it's important.
Well, I mean, it really speaks to what Neil was just saying. It could be the end of papers that are submitted without that kind of check. If you do run it through this software kit that can detect if you have used the software to create your paper, I mean, but it's still an unholy nightmare. For any instructor to have to navigate this minefield, and you can, if you haven't played with it, you can give it a set of really fairly focused prompts and ask it to write up a paper for you of a particular length, particular topic, and even in a certain style and referencing particular works. And it will be able to assimilate that into something that is fairly convincing. And sometimes it's nonsense, but sometimes, at least at the first pass at something, it's really pretty good. What it makes me wonder is if we're starting to see the end of people having to sit and write papers where you have to spend a lot of time with the sort of pro forma stuff. Maybe you could have some machine learning that takes care of that, and you put in some of the analytical parts. It could be used for good, but students use it for bad.
It'll be used for bad.
It'll be used for bad way before it's used for good.
Let's have that thing write an AFD and see how it does. All right, Bill Murray, go. What you got?
Yeah, James, I'll take the foghorn for my pick just because I like the dulcet sounds of it.
Oh, it makes me happy.
All these other picks have been so good. I looked on the calendar coming up for WeatherBrains, and I noticed that some guy named Bill has to do the newsletter article this week. So I better get started on that right after the show tonight. So I'll work on that. Shout out to Jen for making our newsletter so awesome every week. If you haven't subscribed to it yet, you need to. We got the team from Waymo on the show next week on Monday night, the 30th. Many thanks to John Bangoff for giving up his slot tonight. For Amanda and Josh and all the folks from the Weather Service. We appreciate that very much. John will join us on the 6th, and we'll go back to talking about snow squalls. Another very dangerous weather phenomenon, but one we don't get to experience here in Alabama. And then Paul Pisano and the folks from Pathfinders will be with us on the 13th. And then I'm really excited because we've got writer Christine Harper, her fabulous book, Weather by the Numbers. She's in Great Britain, so she's going to stay up late and talk to us on Monday the 20th. So I'm looking forward to all those shows that are coming up, James. And I've really enjoyed meeting Amanda. Of course, Josh is an old friend, and of course Jason and Kevin and John are old friends too. But Amanda, we're glad to have you in Alabama, and thankful that you were able to join us tonight. And shout out to the leadership at Gray for letting you guys do it. We appreciate that.
Yeah, thank you guys so much. I mean, this is something that I've watched since, college back in the early 2010s. So thank you so much. I can finally say that I've been on WeatherBrains. I feel like I can check that off of my meteorology bucket list. So thank y'all for having me.
Plug your social media feeds, Amanda. How can people follow you?
And if you see something on TikTok, it's not me. Apparently, there's a lot of stuff about me on TikTok. I'm not on TikTok. Facebook, Amanda Curran, WSFA. Twitter, WSFA_Amanda. I hear that I'm really good on Twitter. I get that a lot. People will see me in Walmart. They go, "Hey, I follow you on Twitter." And I'm like, "Thanks. I appreciate that." So
everybody go follow Amanda on Twitter right now. All right. But you do a great job, Amanda. And thanks for coming on the show tonight. So, John DeBlock, anything you need to plug from the Weather Service in Birmingham?
And we are blessed with such a wonderful team of communicators and meteorologists in Central Alabama. I hope our citizens realize how blessed they are for what we have to offer them. You guys do a wonderful job communicating the threats that we're putting out there. It's a teamwork, and that's nothing more that can be said than an awesome team in Central Alabama.
Kevin Laws, any final word from you? Anything you need to plug?
Yes, when you have John Bangoff on the show, ask him why he didn't come to Birmingham. Turned us down, so I'd like to know get an answer.
Don't have enough snow squalls for him.
Wow.
I think there's a little bit more to the story than that. Maybe you want to dig in a little bit on that. So.
All right, that's
okay.
the 60 minutes portion of WeatherBrains will kick in.
I like it. So we are a little late here, but thanks everybody for hanging in there with us. This was a great show. And again, this discussion could go on for a long time. For those that are new here, we typically record Monday nights. We produce it live. You can watch it live on YouTube, but we're at 8 o'clock Eastern, 7 o'clock Central. Our YouTube channel is just WeatherBrains. And we know that most of you listen. And whether you watch or you listen, we're just glad you're there. If you'd like to get in touch with us, our email address, and we promise an email segment next week, it is email@weatherbrains.com. So on behalf of the entire WeatherBrains crew, I'm James Spann. Thanks for listening. Have a great week and God bless.
So John Bangoff was the #1 recruit that got away from you Kirby Smarts and Nick Sabans down there in Calera, huh?
I just, you're just going to need to talk to him about that. It's been a couple of years.
Maybe it was the NIL money, Kevin. Maybe y'all are not paying enough down there.
Well, I say, listen, it's still a little bit raw for me right now. So, but you can give him a hard time about that. No, he's great, and I've always liked him. So, hey, let me pitch an idea to you. So, at Mississippi State coming up at the symposium, I don't go every year, but I thought about going this year. What do you think about? Let's maybe do a little talk about what we sort of see from the Weather Service sort of sees from the TV Met side. And what I'm getting at is, the things I've seen over the years, sciencey sort of things that I think could help the young TV Mets. Because I know Mississippi State has a lot of broadcast folks. I'd like probably just talk exclusively to them about things that I've noticed over the years. I'll give you an example. Okay. Being able to point out, how about this? Not forgetting the science part of your job. You have a job on social media and Twitter, but there's also a science element that you need to keep up with. Let's say being able to identify TDSs and things like that are very important. So sort of like a top 5 things that I've seen. Do you think that talk would go over well? Or
I think it would be great. Urgently needed.
Yeah.
Okay.
Because I just see so many guys now, they worry about their TikTok counts and the dancing and the cussing and the, and the whatever they do on TikTok. They forget that you are a scientist. You have to be able to process data on the fly in real time during a tornado situation. And I think it'd be a great talk.
There's another one too. Is just like, what you say up there on television on the green screen matters. And I know it's hard when you're on there wall to wall. Maybe there's not, you're trying to fill. You don't want a lot of dead air. I understand that, but sometimes words do matter. And it's how careful do you have to be when you're up there and what you say.
No, and again, what Josh and Amanda talked about, they're a great example in this situation. Absolutely, yeah.
Sure.
I think it's probably too late to do it this year. And it's coming up like in a couple of weeks, isn't it? Or like in a few weeks.
I haven't gotten an invitation yet, so I'm not sure.
Maybe me and you got blackballed, Kevin. I don't know. Stirring up trouble over there the last year.